Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Anyway, without further ado, let me tell you about my friend Jason Gregory. He is, first of all, he's joining us live from the south of India. Jason is a spiritual philosopher and practitioner of internal arts and esoteric health. He is an internationally renowned author, writer, filmmaker, teacher, and worldwide speaker specializing in the fields of Eastern and Western philosophy, comparative religion, spiritual traditions, metaphysics, and ancient cultures. Jason has been living in Asia for the last several years and has been studying with the students and masters of varying sects of Buddhism, Gnosticism, Hermetic Philosophy, Hinduism, and Taoism. And from what I understand, he's going to be going on tour and coming here to America as well in the coming months. I believe in September and October, a UK and US tour. So without further ado, let me welcome Jason Gregory to the show. Hi, Jason. How are you today?
I'm great, Bernard. How are you today? Good?
I'm really good, really good. And I know I thanked you before the show, but let me thank you again for staying up at midnight on your time to join us today. I appreciate it.
It's good. It's good. It's not too cold over here. It's just nice and warm, so it's a good night to be up.
Oh, very good, very good. And we just before the show, you were telling me a little bit about India. What was it? As people might be able to tell from your accent, you are originally from Australia, and I think I remember seeing your work. God, I guess back in 2009, 2010, 2011, and I thought you were in Australia this whole time. What got you involved with the work that you are doing, not only in consciousness, but in truth, awareness, and everything else that you're doing?
Well, I didn't come from any sort of special background. My family and that weren't spiritual. You could say they had no sort of religious framework. But when I got older in my 20s, when I met my wife, actually, I left Australia and we traveled extensively through Asia, and I was just naturally drawn to a lot of the, you could say, mainly the Eastern wisdom traditions, but also like the Western esotericism and also the esoteric of a lot of traditions, or you could say the perennial wisdom of a lot of traditions. And just the way that life unfolded over here naturally drew me that way, and the people I met and the experiences I had led me into my own search, my own realization, you could say, and then also led me into writing. Writing was something that actually came spontaneous to me. It was not something that I set out to do. My background mainly from my father was sort of a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And so I sort of had a lot of notions about the world from my dad, even though I didn't listen to him much when I was a kid. But it seemed to flower a lot in me when I got older, and I started to see the conspiracy and corruption in the world, especially involved with 9/11 and JFK and a lot of the the more popular conspiracy theories. But then I naturally, though I was extremely interested in that in my 20s, I would naturally drifted away from that, and I went more into a search of consciousness and actually what it means to be alive and to be a part of this universe. So traveling really led me a lot into this path, more so than anything else.
How nice, how beautiful to have the opportunity to learn from your travels and evolve from them, and to doing the work that you're doing, which is helping so many people. Speaking of Australia and conspiracy theories, one of my favorite people down there, beside you, I think back in the day when I first started doing this back in 2006, 2007. The only names I knew from Australia was Jason Gregory and Max Egan. And I don't know, are you familiar with Max Egan's work?
Yeah, yeah, I know Max personally. Yeah, he's a good guy.
That's what I thought you guys probably knew each other.
Yeah,
Anyway, he's gotten really involved with the whole Palestine thing right now, which I guess we're all eventually drawn to our one issue, I guess is the word I want to use. But
yeah.
how do you see, from your observation, from your travels, and from being involved in the spiritual consciousness and activist communities, what are you seeing is happening? I feel, for me, if I may share, from what I'm seeing, and I think we probably went through the same thing. Many people were involved in the awareness of what was starting to happen. That we became aware of quote unquote these conspiracies or these corruptions or these hidden truths that have been evolving, well, but not evolving, that have been stifling evolution. But eventually we see that many people like yourself and myself, we begin to realize that we have to change the inside as well as the outside. What are you seeing a kind of an evolution of this whole movement happening right now, or what's your take on it?
Oh, definitely seeing that, and again, when you explore consciousness, the basis of any change is really changing yourself. It's not so much the external situations that are happening in the world, though we can say that conspiracy theories are a catalyst actually for change, and I think that's what I think that's why a lot of people are waking up. A lot of people are actually drawn to say even Eastern philosophy or Western esotericism, because on the back of such things as conspiracy theories or just taking notice of what's happening in the world, people begin to transform their consciousness, and you begin to become aware of the parts of reality that are not really highlighted by the media, you could say. So I think that it's anything serves its purpose. In my work, I don't really say to people that they should invest too much time and energy into conspiracy theories, because that can also lead to a lot of paranoia as well on an individual level. But again, it's a paradox, because you've also got to be a little bit aware of what's going on around you, but at the same time you've got to be grounded in your own center, and you've got to really understand how you are responding to the world rather than the world responding to you. So, I always bring back my focus to consciousness and about how the individual is an aspect of what's going on, and how you yourself can actually. It doesn't mean that you have to ignore the world. It just means to understand that the world itself is really formulated within your mind. It's not really something that we can give tangible name and form, because any situation in life, like even if you and I were to discuss, Bernard, you may see something totally different to the way I see it. Now, it doesn't mean that your way is right or my way is wrong, or vice versa. It just means that it means something different to us in the mental plane of consciousness. And so, when we want to really nut down where the world is, we've got to really understand that the world is within our mind, and meaning that the way that we name reality, external reality, and the way we associate with it, all are always on the background of our environmental conditioning. So there's a lot to go into there when we discuss, especially worldly events and such things, because we can't really nut down a specific answer as to why such things are the way they are. We could use 9/11 for an example, and obviously everyone's is split on, say, if 9/11 was an inside job, or if the so-called official story is true. But those sort of things can get you also lost because you become so vexed with trying to prove a certain standpoint because that standpoint suits your own psychological temperament. But if you can sort of step back and regardless of if it was an inside job or not, just step back and observe the way you are approaching certain situations and so forth and so on.
Oh man, that's awesome. I got to share what I just posted this morning. It's very funny how you're saying clarifying exactly what I just said. My Facebook status this morning was the secret of being a successful spiritual activist is to expose corruption, inequality, and injustice, work to create change within and outside of ourselves while not getting engaged in the drama or attached to a specific outcome. And you've just explained it even further, so thank you for that.
Well, that's beautiful that you said that, Bernard, because that's sort of I think the key for most people spiritually too. It's in Sanskrit they call this Nishkama karma, which actually means you can be active in the world, but you don't have to also be you also don't have to have an inward agenda. You respond to the world without your own prior agenda, and it's almost effortless in nature, and that's usually what changes the world. What doesn't change the world is the way that we have been programmed from children, either east or west, which is to sort of come to the world with your own agenda, which does nothing but pull your attention into the drama of life, and then that doesn't really contribute to things because we can't solve chaos with more chaos. We need someone who can see who has the clarity to see order out of chaos. So again, like these are old ancient things that we are talking about, but it's a way of being effortless in life, and also being inwardly you're not touched by what's going on. It doesn't mean that you're not compassionate or you don't empathize with the situation. It just means that you don't have an agenda. It means that you're moving with the world and not against it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think I recently heard a gentleman, I forgot who said I was watching a video or a movie, probably another documentary, and he said my intention is not to have an intention, but to open to my intuition and allow my life to move through spirit, or something to that extent. I'm paraphrasing here. And it was very interesting because it's just like what you're saying now. We don't necessarily need to have an agenda, and it goes back to that whole idea of attaching ourselves to the outcome of a specific situation or an issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, like we just have to look at desire for example to articulate this. Desire itself is not really. There's nothing wrong with having desire, but the problem is when we continually satisfy our desires. This is where the suffering and the trouble comes from. So it's the same in what we're saying. And, most of the great sages and the great seers of the world, they don't have that particular agenda. And this is, why what I get into a lot about the book is that's sort of what evokes the science of humility out of an individual, because it's not that they have something that they want to try and do and change the world. They're just being their pure self. They're not being who they're conditioned to be. They're being what's beneath that, and that's what usually helps transform the world, rather than us going around with our picket signs and yelling at people in the streets. That that has its place, but it doesn't really change the world on a fundamental level. Because the individual hasn't changed. Maybe if the individual had changed and they still had the picket sign, who knows? Maybe that would induce more change. But usually it doesn't. And we've seen this throughout time, because we've had revolutions. We've had people who have we had the counterculture movement and everything. And though that these are great things, if we can see it from a higher perspective, this has put us in a certain direction. But if we are looking at, say, individual enlightenment, for example, then these things don't really contribute to that because there hasn't been any great inner self work that's taken place.
I couldn't agree with you more. I find that one of the greatest, I don't want to say argument, but discussions or debates that I have with some of my dear friends in the activist world. And I'm a former member of Occupy and was out there for 3 years doing the whole Occupy thing. And uh, it just seemed that, there was a certain, how shall I say, while bringing clarity and awareness to an issue is a good thing. What happened with me was I felt that I just didn't want to be angry anymore and angry about that particular issue. And I was like, well, if I'm going to change this issue, well, I don't want to be, I don't want to live in a place where I'm in opposition to it. And somebody said it to me a long time ago, don't fight against something, fight for something. And I thought that was a great thing that stuck with me. But the reality of it is that I just didn't want to be angry and frustrated anymore. And when you're doing something like that through from that particular vibration, it doesn't really change anything because let's say we were going to change. Let's say, okay, well, the Occupy movement in the United States was about, ending the control of Wall Street and the U.S. government. And we have a thing here called Citizens United and how money basically pays for all the politicians. And, well, let's say we got rid of all that. What would change if we did not change? If something else didn't come in, or if something else came in to replace that was just as bad, it really wouldn't change anything. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I agree with you wholeheartedly that unless the collective makes that internal change, that external change, no matter how much you scream and poke at it, it's not going to make a difference.
Well, that's right, Bernard. And I guess you nutted it out when you realized that deep down you weren't happy and you weren't healthy in that from that particular standpoint. And we've all felt that. So, we collectively need to reorientate our focus and understand that, all society and culture is the result of the individual and not the other way around. And one of the big problems in the world is that we have the view that the society and culture is what makes the individual, but that's not the truth. So, we need to reorientate our focus and understand that if we want to really heal what's going on here, we have to start with ourselves first. And then, change doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. But what we need to realize is that change is enduring. Everything is changing all the time. The problem is our attention is not focused to what's going on. So we want change like we want a fast food meal. We want it now. And the thing is that if we can persevere and continue our own inner self work, change will happen in our own lives, which is a small part of what's going on in the whole. And all of the old philosophies, some of the most ancient philosophies have got us to this standpoint. Like if we look at Confucianism, say in China, Confucius himself was organizing a socio-economic, political, religious system for people to be controlled by, actually. And then this is just one sort of aspect of how we got ourselves in trouble long term. And philosophers such as Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi at the time were sort of pointing out that, the individual themselves don't need to be controlled. The problem is having a system to try and control the individual, because the individual is the system. It's not the other way around. So we need to allow the individuals of the world to move in the way that they move, whether that be, however that be. In most cases, if you let an individual live the way that they would like to live, they end up being very creative people, artistic people, spiritual people, matter of fact. Mm-hmm. It's only when we impose on them a system to believe in, and in our case, it's democracy in the West, is that we develop these tendencies and that from a society and a culture that we know nothing really about, and then we impose that on the world. And this is sort of it goes really deep, because a lot of people, though you and I, Bernard, we may be support and be advocates of the Western liberal view, how far does that reach, though, without encroaching on other traditions and without understanding other traditions? Because, we may think that it's a great thing to have have gay marriage, have all women have free rights, and all of these things are a wonderful thing from our standpoint. But how far do we take that? And I think that that's a situation in the world at the moment, that where we ourselves are becoming part of the culture and the society that is imposing that on other traditions, and most notably Islam. There's always a lot of negative press about Islam, but the thing is, I sort of come from the natural perspective of say Lao Tzu, where if you just leave things the way they are, not things naturally grow the way they should. Though we may look at certain parts of the Muslim world and feel that that's not right. Who are you and I to say? We are only saying that from our perspective, our own Western liberal view, as opposed to their view. And so, if we step back and we allow things to just be as they are, without our conditioning imposing our own will upon it, then things will naturally grow and be probably all the situations that we have in the world will naturally grow in harmoniously. And a lot of people may argue with my standpoint there, because they might say, yeah, but the Muslim world attacked the West and so forth and so on. But how far does this go back? Where did this begin? Did this begin back in when Israel was born in 48, or how far did this go back? No one can really tell. And the thing is that if we want to heal such situations, it's pointless for us to continue this rivalry, which is actually a rivalry of two ghosts. Because the Western liberal view versus the Muslim view is actually just the collectivist view. It's not. It has nothing to do with the individuals of it. And because I've traveled Asia extensively and the Middle East, actually, most Muslim people in general are brilliant people. They just get bad press because of a few bad apples, and
they're more liberal than you think. Individually speaking,
they are. It's you only have to go to somewhere like, say, Indonesia to see that they're pretty liberal, and I don't want to go into a lot of stories there, but it's not so much how the media portray them. That's kind of the point. And I guess that if we can get away from if on an individual level, if we can understand that we are the society and culture, and the society and culture is not us, then we can start taking big steps into changing the world and understanding each other a bit more.
It's almost as if we have to come to a place within ourselves to, I don't want to say give permission, but that's the word that comes into my head, to give society and give nature and give humanity permission to be itself. And it's very difficult for a lot of people, especially I see it in the human rights movement, which I'm very involved in, and or even the gun movement. Some people love guns, some people hate guns, and they just want to make all these laws, and everything. And I feel that imposing your will, imposing your will on somebody is stifling. So imagine the whole idea of an empire imposing its will on a societal collective is much more harmful.
Yeah, well, it is, and we've seen that through history. History, we are the children of history, actually, from that perspective. So, any ideology, any theology, or anything that imposes its will upon your own consciousness, it has to be examined. And I think the problem with most of us is that we just accept things far too easily without examining. Is this right for me? Or is it right in general? So, I always tell people to, as part of your inner work, you have to examine what your own psychological, the framework that you've been given. Is the framework itself, does it have any validity, or are you just upholding a system that is built on a foundation of sand?
Yes, here. This leads me to so many more comments and questions, but we're going to be taking a break in just a few minutes. But I've to kind of not summarize, but to generalize my personal philosophy, and believe it or not, this comes from, I guess it was Gerald Gardner, the witch in the British witch or whatever, and he said, "Harm none, do what you will." And so long as we're not imposing harm on other people, who are we to say what's right and what's wrong?
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Today I'm speaking live with Jason Gregory, who's kind enough to join us from the south of India. Welcome back, Jason.
Hey, Bernard, great to be back.
And can you tell us the name of the city that you're in again, or the region?
Yeah, it's it's called Tiruvannamalai, and it's in the state of Tamil Nadu in the south. It's more popular known for the 20th century Hindu saint Sri Ramana Maharishi. So for those listeners out there who know him.
Very good. Wow. Well, you must have great internet service because you sound great. I've always actually, when I do cross-continental.
Well, usually I've been struggling a bit with internet here, so it's I got a new internet just the other day, so I'm very fortunate to be able to speak to you so clearly, I guess.
Yeah, very nice, very clear, very nice. Thank you. I'm glad you got that. So, Jason, talk to me a little bit about your new book, and I'm very interested in hearing what you mean by, well, first of all, the name of your book is The Science and Practice of Humility, The Path to Ultimate Freedom. And I think it's very different. I feel everyone hears the word humility and has a different understanding of what that means. Does it mean humble? Does it mean being meek? What did you mean by what do you mean by the practice of humility? What is humility?
Well, humility deep down is, a lot of people do associate humility with humiliation, actually. So, or sort of a low tendency that, we shouldn't acknowledge, especially in the world that we live in of control and force. Humility is sort of something that most people appall. But humility itself is it's actually, to explain humility best is to use an analogy of with water, because water is like it's pure in nature and it follows the river stream without resisting it, and it always seeks the low places that most people do not seek. Most people seek the high places in life. So water is always moving fluidly and without attachment, and also moving to the greater ocean. So water is, the lowest lying force of nature, but it's also the most powerful nature, paradoxically. And that's kind of a metaphor for humility, because humility itself, as we see through the ancient masters and also, contemporary masters, is that humility, their humility shines. It's not so much their knowledge or their prowess. It's their humility that shines. It's a power, and that power is, though you may observe them as kind of, strange people, and people who they do appear in some sense as lower than the ordinary man, but at the same time they have this power that has the ability to transform the world. And we only have to see that through like say Sri Ramana Maharishi, who I talked about. He sort of lived from that place, and if you come to Tiruvannamalai, you feel that the presence of him still here, even though he died 65 years ago. But there's still that presence here, and people have been transformed even after he has passed away. And we see this through mythology. We see this through the ancient stories. Whether you want to believe Jesus or Buddha are real or mythological, nevertheless, what you need to understand is that the story of this humility that they exude is sort of, it reverberates through history, and we still have these stories. Whether you associate that with dogma or not is not the point. Is the story is the humility that they exude is what transformed the world, and we still see that today. So humility itself is that that low aspect of our psyche, but paradoxically, it's the highest aspect. And, a lot of people don't seek that, because when you seek humility, humility means you have to be receptive to life. You have to come to life with no agenda. And we are taught in the modern day, in the modern era, both East and West, that you are to meet reality with control and force. I'm going to control today. It's going to go like this, and so forth and so on. But that's not actually the way the universe is built, because the universe happens to you regardless of what you think is going to happen, because, it doesn't matter what you plan to do, because usually what you seek out to do every day is altered. And, if you're observant of your own reality, you see this. And actually, India is a great place to observe this, because India is sort of a place where the universe just continually happens to you without your ability to try and control a situation. Like for example, I will plan to do something one day here, and then even just a simple plan of going to hire a bicycle is thrown into chaos. For many reasons, but it's just the way it is over here. But you still see this in your everyday life in the West, and the problem is people aren't observant of their own life. We're not sort of sitting back in what we would call a natural self, observing the universe happening to us. We're sort of sitting at the evolutionary end, or you could say the prefrontal cortex of the brain, where the ego is, and we are trying to discern how reality should be according to us, and that's where all the problems most of the problems of life begin, is from that temperament. So, if you can sort of soften that temperament and become receptive to life, then you'll understand deeply that humility itself is what transforms the world, and actually living from that place is what transforms the world. But this humility should not be confused with the unctuousness of Uriah Heep and Charles Dickens' novel David Copperfield, where Uriah Heep is sort of this very it's pretending to be humble, actually, because that's what society wants. The humility has to be authentic, has to be genuine, and that genuine humility can only come forth if you yourself are willing to accept life instead of fight life. So, I always tell people to be receptive to life. It doesn't mean that you have to be flimsy and allow life to push you around and a lot. It means that just when you struggle with something in life, and sometimes there's no other way to move through a certain situation, you have to just let it be, and you have to let life take its own course. And this is something that we all struggle with every day, because a lot of people are success driven. A lot of people want to achieve a lot of things, but things take time, and I guess in our anxiety and stress-ridden culture that we have, is people can't wait to let their own consciousness unfold. And this is something I've had to learn over the last 10 years in just letting my life take place, because when you're in places like Asia, and being an Australian male, things don't just happen. You can't just make things happen. Things have to happen to you. So this is how it is with all of us.
And and as someone who's gone through a life, how shall we say, a life-changing moment, for lack of a better term, of being able to just let go and let life happen, is very freeing at the same moment. And I feel that there's so much resistance to that. I was having a discussion at a cafe here with a gentleman a couple days ago on this very topic. And he was asking me about my, for lack of a better term, we use the term awakening. And that moment where I just said, you know what, I'm throwing my hands up, let the universe take me where I need to go, and I did the whole Buddhist thing, and I got rid of all my possessions and took off on a backpack and with a backpack and my cat, and ended up here doing what I'm doing now. And but the scariest thing was also the most freeing thing. And I think people have, again, that idea of humility or being humble, or I don't want to say having faith, because it wasn't even about having faith. I didn't pray to God to save me. I didn't pray to Isis to save me, or Buddha. It was just like, I trust the universe. You're obviously have something in store for me, and I'm just going to go with this. And it is, again, going back to that idea, it's very freeing just to let go of who you think you are.
It's right, Bernard. It's when we do let go, when we consciously make that decision, that it's also you also feel it physiologically, like you feel your whole nervous system begin to relax. There's like all the stress that just begins to drop away from your organism, and it's, you know, again, like there are these notions in religion where they use the word surrender mainly, and you know, they say you should surrender to God, but you know, from what you're saying is surrender to the universe, and this is probably more the I guess the real way to kind of articulate it. And so, you know, once you surrender, you know, then your life begins to align with sort of something else, and you move. You know, it's like what Alan Watts said. He said he was always in his own way. So the key to it was remove yourself out of the way, and that self is usually the conditioning that has to be out of the way. And you know, there was one psychotherapist, French psychotherapist, Hubert Benoit, and he said our fundamental suffering comes from the understanding that reality is, from our belief actually, that reality is not perfect already the way it is, so we have to change it. And he said that if we were to step back and to have faith, or to trust, to use probably a better word, is as a freeing thing from individually, but also it frees you to be who you truly are, because you're moving without the shackles of your conditioning. And you know, I think that's a beautiful way to explain it, because when you get back into that aspect that reality is perfect, exactly the way it's supposed to be, then you yourself begin to move in that manner, and you know, you will see your life differently as you did. You know, sometimes people have to drop all their possessions. Sometimes people have to give away all their money to realize a lot of things, and this is why, you know, we see this a lot, I guess, when you see born again Christians, where they go through, well, beforehand they weren't born again, they weren't Christians, but they go through a situation where their life is threatened, and then they find Jesus or God or what have you, and they say they let go because but the problem is they had to get down to the lowest of the low to realize that what they were trying to do was not going to happen. That's the fact of the matter. So you had to let go no matter what. And you know, in India, this is symbolized through the life of a sadhu, where most sadhus come out of businesses and come out of the corporate world, where they are striving and seeking to be successful in that life, and they realize that they continually hit a brick wall, so they really drop everything. They drop social job title, they drop bank account, and they put a loincloth on and they walk the streets. And then, you know, that's a lot of faith there, but we don't have to go to that extent. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, if we can see reality as it truly is, and it is only as it is, if we can get ourselves out of the way from seeing it the way that we think it should be, then our life will come into harmony with the universe, God, Brahman, whatever you want to call it.
And I wish I would have known those secrets 10 years ago. But it is it's very I don't want to say it is humiliating in the sense of that term, you know, humiliation, but it is humbling is the word I'm looking for. And it does change you when you allow yourself to be in that state that you're describing. We feel that you know, we're constantly battling with our egos in one way or another, but well, I guess let me move on a little bit, because I would think that, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, that in order for us to come to this place, is there any type of practice or anything that needs to be done, whether it be meditation or yoga or whatever it is that you want to call it, contemplation, philosophizing? What is it that you would consider something that needs to be done or doesn't need to be done?
Well, there's no real, I guess there's no real particular formula for each individual. You know, each individual is different. This is why in India they have 7 forms of yoga, because the 7 forms of yoga represent the temperaments of the different psyches that individuals have, So, some people are attracted to movement, some people are attracted to contemplation. So there are different forms of spiritual practice for this. So there's not, I would say, I would obviously support anybody who's going to take up meditation or take up any sort of form of spiritual cultivation. But I guess that the one thing that gets us out of all of our struggles that the ego has in the society is to drop everything, is to stop striving. And this is sort of the last obstacle, actually, of all spiritual practice, is to understand that where are you trying to get? This is the thing. Like, if we look at all of the literature, we look at all of the Buddhists, the Hindu, Taoists, or even if we look in the Lost Gospels, is that, enlightenment in itself is our own nature. It's our own, we are liberated naturally. We just don't think we are. Our mind eclipses the sun of consciousness from our awareness. So, so what we do is we take up a form of spiritual practice where we again, it's good because it does refine the consciousness a lot, but the social and cultural habit of striving has not ceased. We're still seeking something. We still want something from the universe instead of just being okay with how the universe is. And so a lot of the great masters always say, stop striving, just drop it and just allow your life to be as it is. It doesn't mean that you don't have to, it doesn't mean that you stop meditation. It means that you meditate because you are the Buddha. It doesn't mean that you meditate because you're trying to be the Buddha. You meditate because you understand that this is what Buddhas do. And Shunryu Suzuki actually articulated that best. But so, when we get into that realm, it means that we're living our life for what it is. So that means that we're doing meditation because this is what meditation is. It doesn't mean we're trying to seek something from it. That's like trying to say that we want to gain great health from eating a salad, and the salad better give it to me. It just means that you eat the salad. So this is sort of I think the key aspect of understanding the science of humility, because if you continually strive in your life, you'll continue to come across obstacles, you'll continue to suffer, and you'll only have fleeting moments of enlightenment, when enlightenment is our own nature. So the only way that you can feel that is when you let go, when you trust, and even if you allow your nervous system to just fully relax. Like I always tell people that, because people always say, I want to be relaxed in life, I want to be at ease. And I say, like, how busy are you? How agitated is your mind? Are you always on the internet? Are you always playing with your smartphone? Are you always incessantly chatting with people? And though there's nothing inherently wrong with these, all this does is disturb your psychosomatic organism. So your nervous system is constantly under attack. So just allow yourself time to relax. Sit there, drink a cup of tea, and just look at a tree, sometimes they're the greatest moments of contemplation and meditation. But what this does is it allows your nervous system to relax, and anxiety begins to dissipate, stress disappears, and this is actually, to do this is almost a cure for all of the mental diseases that we're undergoing in the world, because our life is becoming so fast paced that there's no stop to how fast paced it can be. People are incessantly moving, and so what a sage would say is stop moving, stop the movement, or stop trying completely, which is the Chinese notion of wu wei, is to embrace non-doing instead of to be perpetually doing. So I would say to embrace that aspect of your life is to embrace that there is a part of your life that is completely at rest, and embrace that. The only reason we don't embrace that is because we feel boredom, and boredom is sort of all boredom is as a result of is the slowing down of our ego, and our ego is beginning to get agitated. But if you continue to embrace the boredom, you'll begin to feel something deeper in yourself, and that's the key of all spiritual work. So I would say, yeah, to naturally stop trying and striving is what leads people more to a deeper understanding of themselves and the universe.
Thank you for that, actually, and you brought up some really good points within what you just said because I find, and this is only within my own journey and my own path. You brought up boredom, and I just had an aha moment. I haven't been bored in years, and I remember being bored very, very easily. I was like, God, I'm so bored. We got to do something. I got to go somewhere. I got to do something, and I never thought of it. I'm never bored anymore. I love to be left alone. I love quiet. I love, no phone. I never answer my phone. My friends can't stand it. I don't text. I don't use the telephone. I use Skype and I use email. But the the idea though, and I think that this is where much of the obstacle is within our Western and maybe some Eastern society is that a majority of the people and we were talking. I do a meditation class here locally, and we were having a discussion on just sitting in silence. And nobody is comfortable, and no one in the group was comfortable sitting in silence. I'm like, how do you feel when you sit in silence? Oh, my head starts to chatter. I have to put on the TV. I got to put on some music. I need to go on the internet. People do not want to be left alone with their thoughts. And I wonder if that a side effect of our culture. Is it from the media? Where does this come from? Like you said, is it the ego getting frustrated, needing to, be given attention?
Well, I feel it's also a habit too, Bernard. We from children actually we're taught to be habitually doing stuff and never just allowed to sit and like you said be and to simplify your life. Like you said, there's a beautiful thing that you said that you use email and Skype. I'm much the same because I think that's just it's more economical and it's just more simple for my life and it makes it easier. But most people um, uh, they are afraid of that sort of simplicity because it doesn't give them enough stimulation. They need to be on the phone. They need to be texting. They need to be incessantly talking. So I think that, as you said, that they're mainly attracted only with their mind, what's going on within their mind. And when you introduce meditation to be silent and to not give them an image of anything, just to sit there, be quiet and just, and just embrace your thoughts, then
we're going to have to take a break, and we'll be right back. Please hold that thought, Jason. We'll be right back after this break.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Jason Gregory today about his new book. But before we get back into our talk with Jason, before I forget, I just want to remind everybody that next week's show, we have a very good friend of mine who's going to be joining us. Psychic medium Tracy Lockwood is coming back on the show. She was on about a year ago, and I believe she was probably the most popular guest we've ever had on here. And so I've asked her to come back, and our show next week is going to be called The Crossing Over Experience, Tales from the Other Side. So I'm really looking forward to having Tracy Lockwood back on the Just Bernard Show here. And that'll be next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Now, before we went on the break, Jason Gregory and I were just discussing a bit about, the idea of being alone with our thoughts and how difficult it is for some people to just be in that quiet space, to just allow yourself to be with your thoughts I don't want to say without distraction, but Jason, you were making a good point, and I don't know how well you are holding that thought, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, it's most people they don't analyze their own psyche, I guess, Bernard, and we usually believe we are our thoughts, and the thing is that thoughts come and go like the wind. It's not really something that's tangible, but there are usually some prevailing thoughts for certain people, and it depends on I guess the memories we have, also the habits and the tendencies that we cling to, And, like in Sanskrit, they say samskaras, which means the impressions that we've taken in our mind. And the problem with this is that when we get the impression in our mind that sort of burns its signature into our memory, we often associate with reality from that standpoint. And the thing is that was just a passing experience that we experienced, and doesn't mean that we have to judge everything other according, but we usually do. And this is a habit that we perpetuate, and this kind of disconnects us from future experiences or present experiences that we are gonna live. So in a lot of spiritual traditions, they say that you need to, in a sense, burn out these samskaras, burn out these impressions through spiritual work or through more self-awareness about your own thoughts, because the thoughts are what leading you to and fro. And so it's difficult for a lot of people in the modern day, because we're kind of brought up in a society and culture where we're supposed to embrace our thoughts and embrace our memory, and this is what defines us as an individual. But this is not really how it is. What defines you as an individual is what's beneath the thoughts, what's beneath the samskaras. It's who you truly are. And we see this through artists or spiritual people, is that they have embraced more so who they are, and that's what shines through. And most people in the world do not embrace the creative aspect because they know nothing about it, and so we live a life of imitation, of sameness actually in the world. So the work to be done is to understand that these thoughts are not yourself. They may help you. They may be beneficial in certain situations, but they're not categorically you. They come and go as the wind. So if we can understand that, then we can move freely in the world with no preconceived notion. And that's a problem. That's a big thing for all of us to live by. But that's the way that we need to live. And otherwise, we go back to what we were speaking about before. We continually perpetuate our own personal agenda on the world, and people don't acknowledge that. People say, "Oh, but that's the way things are," and it's like, "But that's the way things are according to you. It's not the way things really are." So we have this plane of in Zen they call it a plane of imagery and concepts, where we have all of these things, and on this sort of mental plane that we perpetuate. And we do this on very subtle levels, where when we imagine ourselves in the future, we're really thinking about an image of ourselves, and this sort of separates us from what's really going on right now. And usually, what's happening really right now within yourself is stillness and peace and tranquility within the heart. But we don't see that, because we only see, "Oh, this is what I want to be in the future," or this is the shirt I'm going to be wearing tomorrow, or usually it's frivolous in nature. And the problem is the work is to live from that still point, to live from that peace and tranquility of the heart, because otherwise we're continually perpetuating something that's not really there. Like these images we have, these concepts we have of reality, they don't really exist. They only exist really as what we think they exist. They're only our own personal dreams. They're not collective dreams. So and this is the great work that has to be done. We have to realize this. And in meditation, what I teach people in meditation is not to use imagery meditation, because focusing on an image, that though this may be good, this may bring your attention to a still focus, what you find is that invariably thoughts and distractions invariably come back. So I usually go back to the more archaic meditation, which you find in Hinduism and Buddhism and in Taoism, is open awareness meditation. So sitting there comfortably silent and being completely aware of what's going on within your own head. And then if you observe that for enough time, you'll see that the ego has and these thoughts, they have no real tangible reality, because as soon as you focus on what's going on within your head, you watch the thoughts and the images and everything, they flee. And it's only when you forget that you're meditating that the thoughts and the images and that come back and distract you again. But this is an ongoing process that people have to continue to do. So I always tell people to get out of, though there's nothing wrong with imagination. Imagination is great, but the problem is that we over-exercise our imagination, and we over-exercise all of these things that are supposed to define us. So I always tell people to, as in Sanskrit, what they say is neti neti, not this, not this. This means that not this in your mind. It means you're not this and that. You're not these labels. The reality are not these distinctions. These are what you've impressed upon the world. So you've got to somehow transcend them or understand that they're not real.
And that's a very difficult task for many people, I believe, because there is, I mean, within my own spiritual practice, I see it that when we are, let's say Ram Dass calls it peeling away the layers of the onion, and as we're about to peel away that layer of, no, I am not my job. No, I am not my name. No, I am not this body. The ego seems to have this reaction, almost a violent reaction at times. I guess it's best analogized with Buddha's war with Mara. It's like, you are this. It's like, no, I'm not. And so I just find it very interesting. And what I will say though is that one of the things that I did learn from that process of the ego responding like that is it's helped me to develop a relationship with my central nervous system of all things. And I've gotten to learn and feel how when my central nervous system is, whether it's reacting, whether it's agitated. I remember in the beginning of, the last 10 years being very serious about my work, being very vigilant as to what I expose my senses to, what music I'm listening to. I used to love, I come from Miami. I used to love house music and, all that stuff. And I still do sometimes, I enjoy it, but that was my thing. But it would always get me tense, it made me tense. And I was like, well, if it's making me tense, why am I doing it? And not to say that you need to avoid, that one must avoid anything that upsets them. I mean, life is going to upset you. But in the habit of our day-to-day life, in the habit of our day-to-day thoughts, our routines and whatnot, to kind of becoming aware of how our central nervous system reacts just to our day-to-day routine it was very, very helpful to me. And it taught me, okay, well, I don't want to hear the phone ringing all day long. I'm not going to have a phone. I don't need a phone. I have email, I have Skype, and they have a message, if I need it. But this was a way of learning that process to have that stillness, to have that moment. And that's not to say I'm a very busy man. I am a very, very busy man. I work 80 hours a week. I'm constantly going and going and going, but I'm not stressed out. Don't get me wrong. I have moments of being stressed out, but that's life. Sometimes the computer will crash, or But so I'm wondering, is there any type of yoga or anything like that deals with perhaps becoming more aware of the body, or is that something that you've ever heard of?
Well, as you said, Bernard, we all sort of go through these daily fluxes where we have sometimes this tension in our life, and the thing is that in Chinese they say wu wei, and wu wei means effortless action or non-doing, or actually more to the point, not forcing. And so, as you said, you like house music. You are from Miami, but you still enjoy it sometimes. And again, see, it's in moderation now. It's not. It may have been in excess in the past, and I was the same. I grew up in Australia, and I was attracted to metal music. And it's not that I don't appreciate metal music now. It means that I could listen to a piece of Tool or something like that, but it doesn't mean I'm going to sit down the whole afternoon and listen to the whole album. It's just everything in moderation. So, basically, I guess the main sort of spiritual practice to get back to what you were talking is that if we were to use like Joseph Campbell's analogy of the hero's journey, is that you sort of leave as you in reference to the central nervous system, what you were talking about, is as you leave your familiar environment, is you go out on this amazing journey that's not particularly pleasant, but it allows you to grow. It allows you to cut things off, like what you did. You cut all of these things off to allow your nervous system to rest, to allow your mind to rest, to allow everything to be shanty and at peace. And then you can, and then as symbolized in the hero journey, in Campbell's work, is that you come back to the world fresh, and you can be engaged in all of these things that you used to be, but your inner world is completely changed.
Yeah.
Like what you mentioned, your inner world is completely changed, but you still enjoy the odd piece of house music and so forth and so on. And this is in a lot of spiritual traditions, and this is why I mentioned Nishkama karma in Sanskrit, because it refers to that. And also in Zen, they speak about actually before enlightenment, chopping wood and carrying water, after enlightenment, chopping wood and carrying water. So basically that once you've had the realization, it doesn't mean that you're going to float on a cloud and you're going to drift off into the cosmos. It just means that average life continues, but you've changed. You've realized your true nature and the nature of reality and your unity with it. And so from that perspective, if you come from that place every day, then things shouldn't bring your mind into a state of turbulence too much. It's not to say that if someone stamps on your foot, you're going to embrace them with a hug. You might say, what are you doing, idiot? But you're not attached to the experience. It's a spontaneous experience that happens, and you allow it to happen. It passes, and you're not attached to it. And in Zen, there's an old story of an old Zen master, and he was very enlightened, very, very at peace, and very still. And his disciples, they revered him. And then there was a situation where he came across a particular politician who was destroying all the Zen monasteries and so forth and so on. And he stabbed that Zen master, and the Zen master yelled out and screamed and was in extreme pain and died. And then the disciples said to one of the higher monks there that, he never realized, he still screamed and he had all of these reactions when he died. And then the higher monk said, you guys don't understand. That was perfectly natural. It was perfectly spontaneous and how it was supposed to be, because otherwise, if he had reacted any other way, it would just be intellectual. And so he just reacted as naturally as it is. And the thing is that, we are divorced from acting naturally as it is, because we are taught to intellectualize reality and give it a name, give it a form, control it, force it, or do whatever you will to it. But, if we can come back to that effortlessness in our life, then we'll see that we can embrace all of these things that we used to be attracted to, but in a different quality. And we will have a sense of moderation, and, it is a transformative experience for other people to see people like that. So, a lot of people don't understand that sort of the way, the effortless, the no forcing aspect and the hero's journey. But, if you don't understand it, it just means that you haven't went on it. So, I always tell people that, just embrace it. Embrace going into the unknown. Embrace all of this and watch what happens to you, because that's the greatest journey in the world. It's we don't have to seek success in the material world. We can just seek to know who we are, and then you'll really know what success is then.
And that is very true, and something that many people are very afraid of. And that brings me to something is that you talk about in your book is fear, and how, well, I want to bring up something. This is very interesting, and this is kind of mixed in with that video of yours that I posted about the government and whatnot. I posted one of your videos a few days ago. And so this might lean over to the conspiracy world a little bit, but it's very interesting because I find that everything that we're talking about here, everything that you're talking about, everything that you are providing in your book, there is so much fear of it. I'll give you an example. When I first posted the event page for this particular show, a gentleman wrote an entire dissertation, a full-page note on how it was satanic and this is the Illuminazis and they try to trick us and it's the Freemasons and don't get me wrong, I know there's people out there that want to cause harm. I know there are people out there that there are some spiritual people that might have an intention that is not necessarily positive, or that are utilizing spiritual practices that are not necessarily ending for the betterment of humanity. That's all fine and said, but it's very I don't want to say it's very funny, but strange is the word I'm looking for, I guess, how there is so much fear provided in our culture through our media, but not only fear of ourselves, fear of each other, but fear of the tools that we can use to release that fear. And I wonder what your experience has been with that. I don't know about you, but I've been called Illuminati and all these other crazy names, or satanic and Luciferian, and I don't know how many of that you've gotten. But what is your take on that? And if we could bring it down a notch of vibration, to perhaps where is there a polar force that perhaps is working against the empowerment of humanity? Is there that much fear within us? And is it a natural thing? Is it unnatural? What is your take on fear?
Well, I've had it all too, Bernard. I've been called, any and all names, because of the work I do, and it's, and I think that people become very short-sighted if, like, look at the work that you do. You're offering a great service for people to empower themselves, to learn, to experience informative stuff that they won't hear through the media. So, from a common sense point of view, how is this detrimental to the human race? How would that be related to the Illuminati, for example? And I think people get deluded with too many conspiracies. I think that there's the conspiracy about the conspiracies out there these days. We've seen it all before. We've seen it with, this started way back in the counterculture movement, when people started to say that Aldous Huxley and Alan Watts and all of these, Timothy Leary and all these guys were agents of the Illuminati and stuff like this. And then when people went and lived with, say, Alan Watts, lived in a log cabin up in the hills of San Francisco, he lived a very simple life, and there's no phone and none of this. And it's like, well, where's the relationship to the Illuminati? Like, he should be on the dial, shouldn't he? And when you bring this information to them, they're like, there must have been a way. There's always an excuse with these people. And, it's not to say that, that I can't say anything about that, that they're right or wrong. It's just the way that they see reality. And, it's a sad thing, because when you can step back and you can see all the wonderful things that people are doing in the world, you can appreciate it more. And, I guess that there's so much conspiracy theory out there these days that you're going to get these counterintuitive theories. You're going to get all of these things that are, they themselves, it's spreading propaganda itself, like by saying to you, emailing you and having a negative reaction to me being on the show. Everyone's right to their own opinion, but do you know me personally? Have you lived with me personally? This is what I always tell the people who have a go at me. I say, come and live with me in India and see how Freemasonic it is, because if anything, people who are usually criticizing people they feel inadequate to that individual, because that individual is actually doing something with their life and the other person is not, so they feel inadequate. And that's why that you probably get a lot of negative press as well, Bernard, because you've actually empowered yourself, and you know that this is what you like to do. So why should I stop doing it because someone called me part of the Illuminati? It's ridiculous. So you yourself would make people feel inadequate in just being happy with the way that you are. People don't like that in this world these days, because we're taught in our society and culture to struggle. We need to suffer for our enlightenment. We need to suffer to have freedom in the world. This is what has to happen. And actually that's the wrong way to think about it, because that's a social and cultural habit of thinking. That's not an individualistic habit of thinking. We have taken that on from our culture and society. And if we want to be honest with these people that speak about this thing, that culture and the society is an Illuminati or Freemasonic creation. So if your thinking is like that, then you're thinking like them, and not Bernard or myself thinking like that. So, you know, I kind of I get sometimes annoyed with that, because, you know, people, they attack people like Terence McKenna and all of these sort of people, and I think, you know, you never even knew him. You know, it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater once they're dead. You know, it's not easy to do it when they're alive, but, you know, so, you know, I just think a lot of these things are frivolous that people associate with such people like Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Aldous Huxley, yourself, or whoever, as being part of some sort of CIA covert operation, because I don't see any base in it. And then when you ask people about it, there is no base in it. So again, for these people, sorry, Bernard, for these people out there, they just need to realize that their social and cultural habit of thinking is a product of those people they're talking about. So maybe they need to reorientate their focus.
I couldn't agree more. And I was just going to make a comment on that, and I'll move on. But the idea that, well, first of all, you made a very good point that this is a social, a quote unquote, Illuminati socially engineered culture. So if we are going to defend that or whatnot, then we're basically defending the quote unquote powers that be. And the same thing goes with the idea that meditation is satanic, or yoga is satanic, or, you know, the whole idea that anything that is not Christian based or even or even biblical based is considered evil, is really a detriment to the expansion of human consciousness, and to in hopefully creating a better world. We would want to at least see I don't want to say tolerance, but acceptance of other people's beliefs as well as their practices. And for me, I find it hysterical how it's the Bible that says, you know, if you see a sorcerer, kill her, you know. And it's, what a loving quote that is in Deuteronomy. You know, it's Deuteronomy hated psychics, hated, you know, spirituality, hated anything. But I find that, like you said, aligning with that, you're empowering the disinformation, basically. You know, it's empowering the disinformation. Now, with that being said, you made a really good point, and I think I don't know if you were able to talk about it in the book, but now that I have you here, we got about 3 minutes left on this segment. I just wanted to bring up the idea of being spiritual is not sacrifice. A lot of people get very upset when they see I went to a nightclub. You know, I went and drank too much champagne the other night. You know, I was like, oh, that's not very spiritual. It is for me. I relaxed. I got to relax and dance and have a good time, you know. But or getting angry, or saying a curse word, or, you know, this idea that spirituality, you have to be the Buddha under the tree and have no emotion and not be human, is, I feel, a detriment to spiritual growth. And I wonder how much of that you've seen and how you feel about that idea.
Well, I agree with you totally, and you see it a lot. Like, people do make, you could say, spirituality into a form of intellectual dogma and you know, materialism. Actually, you know, like, to think that you are not allowed to go and drink too much champagne and that this is not spiritual is, again, that's just an intellectual opinion. It doesn't really mean anything. You know, spirituality has no dress code. It has no temperament. It has no attitude. You know, you're at ease in your life. This is what it's about. You know, when you're with other people who don't have a spiritual base, you can feel their tension. You can feel a tension on a vibratory level when you're around them. You can feel it. But when you're with someone who has sort of humbled themselves and they just embrace life for what it is, they're at ease with their life. They enjoy drinking a beer. They enjoy going and doing whatever it may be, whether that be associated with what we term quote unquote spirituality. But there is no what could you say? There's no ideology of spirituality, and I think that's what's happening in the world. People are trying to turn spirituality into ideology, and this usually comes from what you were talking about. People who are usually from the Christian base, who are trying to or people who are on the outside who have never practiced meditation or contemplation before, and they just say, well, how can Bernard drink so much champagne? I mean, how can Bernard meditate when he drinks so much champagne and this and that? And they, they usually associate Bernard with drinking champagne every day,
I know.
And so these, so we get a little we get a little far ahead of ourselves there. But all of these notions come from people who who aren't at ease in their life. They've never practiced a form of spiritual cultivation, and they just haven't embraced life in general. And that opens a whole can of worms, because people who think that they're not spiritual but they come from sort of a Christian country, their temperaments are Christian, and they may say, oh, I'm atheist, but your temperaments are still Christian, because you think of God in terms of a king. You think of that there's right and wrong. But when you embrace spirituality, as the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao loves and nourishes all, but does not lord it over them.
Yeah. Beautifully said. We'll be right back after this brief message with Jason Gregory.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I cannot believe we're already at the end of our show with Jason Gregory. The time flies by when you're having a good conversation. Thank you, Jason. We were just talking a bit about the human, being human and being spiritual. And in your book, you talk a little bit about, I guess, looking at the shadow side of our lives and whatnot. And one of the things that many people who are on the spiritual path and or trying to raise their consciousness or using, the law of attraction movement and whatnot, they always there's a fear of being negative and not allowing ourselves to think bad thoughts, not forcing ourselves not to look at the bad stuff on the planet. I remember being accused of being a Satanist because I was against the Afghanistan invasion. It's like, oh, you're so negative, And it's like, well, this is I don't want to show you pictures of what's going on there like some people do, but I do want to point out that it's a crime against humanity to kill other people using war. That's all I'm trying to say. But looking at the shadow self, people seem to be very afraid, and I feel, and that even comes with sexuality, especially in the West. It's like, oh my God, don't talk about sex. Maybe it comes from that whole Victorian mentality of the Anglo Empire or whatnot, but the idea of, I guess, quote unquote, call it our shadow self, and to ignore that. And what are your thoughts on either ignoring it or embracing it or coming to terms with it? How can we utilize that to help us evolve into a deeper way of living?
Well, I like to use the use of negativity as an analogy, because most people continue to, I guess, suppress their shadow because they don't embrace not only the negative aspects of the world, but also the negative aspects of themselves. And, this sort of comes into, where we see, obviously a lot of New Age spirituality these days is usually just about positivity. And not to say anything bad about any of those teachers, but some of the teachers are mainly positivity pushers, where they say that we should just be positive all the time, but at the same time we're just pretending to be positive. It's not really genuine. So we're kind of caught in a vex of how do we be genuinely positive all the time instead of being negative. But the thing is that we have to change our orientation of negativity, because negativity in itself is not bad. Negativity is just the polar opposite of positivity. That's it. So if we can see it that way, then we can see that these polar opposites in our life manifest in our life in certain ways. And if we dig into, say, a lot of our own psychological work, shadow work, to be more specific, is that we begin to not so much ignore the negative, we begin to acknowledge that it exists. I liked what you said about the shadow. Acknowledge those parts of ourselves that exist. It doesn't mean that we can go out like a handyman and renovate them and build them up new. It means that they themselves begin to be absorbed when we begin to become more conscious of them. Most people are familiar with that Carl Jung quote, which, making the darker aspects of ourself conscious is sort of what is one of the keys to enlightenment. And he's not half wrong there. It's about making those aspects conscious and continually seeing the shadow play out in everyday life, because you can be aware of other people's shadow, but the harder thing is to be aware of your own shadow, because sometimes it creeps up on you in specific situations when there is a tough circumstance that's going on, and you react to it, which is below your own conscious self, and it comes out in a specific way that you can be aware that it's your shadow and it's an old habit and tendency, which is what they call in Sanskrit as vasanas. They always say to burn these vasanas out is the hard work, because they are almost like they're spontaneous. They just come out of you from a subconscious level, and those sort of reactions usually get us in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. So the idea is to become more conscious of them, and to not have such a negative reaction to negativity, to see negativity for what it is. And as you said, negativity can be constructive. Like you said, you were pointing out particular situations in the world, and though people might be saying, Bernard, why are you being negative and this and that, all you're doing is pointing to it like you would point to the moon. That's all you're doing. There's nothing different between you pointing to the moon than pointing to a worldly situation. And it is only different from an intellectual standpoint. But what you're doing is pointing out the same thing. So the problem is people then associate with what you're doing as being negative. And the thing is that there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that a lot of people, and especially who are spiritually inclined, they have a tendency to suppress a lot of shadow elements in their life. And actually, a psychotherapist named John Wellwood, he termed the word spiritual bypassing, which basically means that we use spirituality and especially non-dual teachings to suppress a lot of things about ourselves, to try and sit on a cloud in the sky, but our shadow continues to run amok in our life, but we pretend, in a sense, to be on this cloud. And so what he's sort of saying is that, not that the non-dual perspective is wrong, is that what he's saying is that the non-dual perspective cannot be embraced fully and lived if we haven't sort of embraced these shadow elements of ourselves, whatever they may be, because they're all different for each and every one of us. But if we can do that, then we can really live our life fully, live it positively, but not have a negative association to negativity. Negativity in a sense can be useful, can be compassionate in some sense. The only problem, I guess, with negativity from, say, from the perspective of a spiritually inclined person is that there's so much negativity in the world. It's almost engrossing, because we see the media, we see people in everyday conversation. There's usually a negative undertone about just the ordinary speech of people.
Yeah.
So you can see this in people, and I guess that from a spiritual perspective, someone who is spiritually inclined can see that, and then associate negativity with bad. But that's the wrong way to see it. It's just to say that maybe our negativity is not in moderation at the moment. We sort of overemphasize negativity in our society and culture these days, and it's infected actually the religious institutions, the way people of spiritual temperaments. It's within everything. So I guess that if you can dig into your shadow and you can start to embrace certain aspects of yourself, that begins to bring them to light, and the way that you begin to move in life is more free and more positive, and that's what helps people, and I guess that speaking about, as you and I are speaking about, is that people get sort of lost in the intellectualization of certain things about spirituality, about how someone should be as opposed to how someone is. And, spirituality and negativity and positivity are all going to flower differently between each and every individual. There's no certain definitive way that they should represent themselves. So, that's one thing that we need to understand about life, is that there's no one particular interpretation for the universe.
Absolutely. The story of Siddhartha is coming to mind as you're speaking. I'm seeing him like seeing death for the first time and seeing illness for the first time, and it was almost a catalyst for him to see the horrors of the world, to make him want to transcend them.
Exactly. Well, that's a perfect analogy, Bernard, because the story of Siddhartha, the Buddha, came from, he was a prince, you know what I mean? So he never saw any of the atrocities of the world. He lived a very fake existence in that sense. And I think that our society and culture is almost promoting that these days. We're promoting comfortability, convenience, to the point where pain itself is becoming completely numbed, and we're living on this pleasurable cloud. And so that when the painful experience comes, we feel extreme anxiety and extreme stress because life is putting us out of our pleasurable state, and we think it's not right the way it is. And so, I think that people in general need to see, I guess, the atrocities of the world and understand that there's a lot more going on here than what we think. And then there's a lot more, obviously there's a lot more going on here than what the media promote. But, it's, once we do start to see that, we can start to embrace more positive qualities about ourselves, because, I would say that from where I sit, that if someone who is just polluted with comfortability, convenience, and who are only seeking pleasure, I would say that is the very negative state, the very deluded state of existence, because you're just trying to eliminate pain, but pain is just the opposite polarity of pleasure. And this is why in Buddhism they say, it's kind of translated wrong, because in Buddhism they say all you need to just be is happy, but the real translation is what you need to be is content. This is like the middle way of the Buddha. You need to be content. It doesn't mean that you seek pleasure. It doesn't mean that you avoid pain. It means that you just reside in the center of that, and that when pleasure comes, it's good. You embrace it. But when pain comes, you have no aversion to it. You allow it to come. It doesn't mean you seek pain. It means that just when pain comes, you acknowledge it, and you acknowledge that that's a part of yourself, and maybe it's something that needs to be transcended also on an individual level.
It's almost as if, a great example of that was, it was Super Bowl weekend here, and I know you guys don't have American football over there, but there's this sense of that's all that matters. Be happy, watch the silly commercials, watch the wonderful halftime show. And literally it was all over the news, and still all over the news. Again, how the media manipulates. And gosh forbid someone should mention that, the corruption within the whole scheme of it. But it's American pastime, or, there's this nationalism involved, or this identification with that comfort, just like you said, that identification with, and not only that comfort, but the right to be comfortable. That I deserve to be comfortable type mentality, which and it just brings me back to like the whole 12-step program thing of living in denial. The first key is to accept that there is a problem, and then move through working to transcend it and to move into a place of, like you said, being content and living in a place where you can be content, or a state of mind that you are content.
Well, it's true. It's Super Bowl is a good example because it's watched by billions around the world. So it takes the forefront of most people's focus. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with sports. Sport's a great thing. You see the universe playing out through sport. But I guess it's the way that that it takes our focus. It takes our focus away from a lot of things that matter. Like you said, that people kind of believe that they deserve this and they deserve that. my thing, and in the end, it's not your thing. It's those group of men on the field. That's their thing.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
It's
And by the way, I love the fact that you said, "Oh, well, you could see the world, the universe played out." I think maybe only you and I would see that, or a handful of people. Everyone else is just there for the beer and the commercials, but
yeah,
and the betting,
ex-
the gambling. But
exactly. That's what's important, yeah.
different priorities, different priorities.
Yeah.
But
But
anyway,
it's
I'm sorry. Go on.
sorry, but no, but it's a friend actually pointed that out to me the other day. Like in Australia is the same. Like the NRL, the National Rugby League, is massively popular, and I met her. She's an Australian, and she came over the other day. We had a tea and a chat, and she sort of said, she told me about a couple of experiences where she would be near a football stadium, and it's all over the media and the news, but she doesn't have a TV. She's not interested in sport, and she asks, what's on? What's happening? What's happening at the stadium? And one guy, it's an open air stadium too, and it's in Queensland, which is a hot place, and someone said, "Oh, ice hockey's on tonight," and because she doesn't know anything about it, she said, "Oh, that's who's playing," and then they just laughed at her because obviously ice hockey couldn't be on, but their system of belief was threatened because she didn't care or didn't know what was happening. And so, I think this is what's happening, and this may be the reaction that you're also getting, Bernard, about exposing a lot of things about the Super Bowl, and that is because you don't have such a invested interest in it, but that threatens other people because people think that he should like this, and again, it becomes the
Group
almost
think.
like it's group think, and so. And my wife always talks to me about this. Like she likes sport as well, but she's a musician, and she always says like it's a waste of time to be sitting around watching people that are good at what they're doing while you're suppressing that you could be doing that as well. So
That's
we
a
don't
great
have
observation.
yeah, it's a great observation because why put all your attention into an artist when you are an artist as well? Why not be creative yourself? Why put posters up on the wall of certain musicians and this and that and glorify them and become a fanatic when you can be a musician yourself and you can be a sportsman yourself, So,
I couldn't agree more.
We live in a very fanatical world, obviously, and we see this in religion, we see this through sport, which is actually sport is kind of the accepted religion where all religions
Right.
converge. All religions converge into sport. But, if on an individual level we can embrace our own creativity, our own spontaneity, then, we ourselves might become that person on the field that day.
Or at least know that we have the possibility, of doing that,
Yeah, well,
Don't cut ourselves off. Don't cut yourself off from the possibility.
No, of course not. And again, that's why we were talking about with negativity before. Because of the negative undertone in the world, we always rationalize our way out of certain things. I couldn't be a radio host, or I couldn't be an author. And as you know, Bernard, and as I know, it's only until you get rid of those sort of negative thinking that you can actually become a radio host or become an author or write a book. Otherwise you're not going to. You're going to keep rationalizing your way out of it. And this comes back to worth issues that we're all sort of indoctrinated with from our society and culture.
Yes, here, absolutely. And it's so funny. I still don't consider myself a radio host. I'm just doing what I'm doing. and actually, maybe we can talk about that we got about 5 more minutes. My career that I'm doing right now, I'm the director of the Global Illumination Council. I am a radio host. I am an author. I am a teacher that teaches classes. I get interviewed on radio shows. I do tons of different types of media, whether it be blog or teaching classes on YouTube or a YouTube partner. That's the other quote unquote title. But but it's just me doing what I love. And I think that's probably the most important lesson here is I had no intention of becoming a radio host. I had no intention of being a YouTube partner with 28 million viewers or whatever. That was never my intention. I was just doing what I loved. And because I'm doing what I love, I can pay the bills sometimes, you know, sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's just, and I think that was probably the greatest lesson I learned was to give. When I gave up who I thought I was, I became who I am. And the funny thing is that there was a moment, and I don't know if you've ever had these. I'm sure you have these epiphany moments
Mm-mm.
where I finally let everything go. And I felt like I was 15 again. Literally, that same mentality I had when I was 15, that I just felt so free. And I was like, where had I been those last, decades or whatever? I was like, who was that person in my 20s? I don't know him, you
Mm.
know?
Mm.
But again,
Well,
that
that's what.
whole releasing thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's why they say in like a lot of wisdom traditions, you become as a child again, because you like what you said for decades. Who the hell were you,
Right.
And then next minute when you realize you become free, you become fresh, like you said, like a teenager again, and then life presents itself to that. Everything is fresh in life again. Every day is fresh, every moment is fresh. There's no preconceived idea of how life should be, and I guess the thing that listeners could take out of what you said is that as soon as you remove your social and cultural self out of the way, the program that's been embedded, the ego, when you begin to move that out of the way, then the real individual begins to stand forth. And in Chinese they actually have a philosophy about this, where in Taoism there's a Chinese word called Li, which actually means that each individual has a particular organic pattern in them, a particular nature in them, but it can only be accessed if you begin to prune the psychological bush, you could say, begin to chop away all of these. I should say weed the garden that your tree is in, and then that pattern begins to come forth. And I know that that's on a metaphysical level, but when you begin to experience that in your life, then it's a reality. It's not something that's tangible, but it's something that's real. That you've had it as an experience, and you've had that. I've had that, and millions of other people
Yeah.
are having it because people are waking up.
And that's a very good sentence to end on. People are waking up. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your book, The Science and Practice of Humility, The Path to Ultimate Freedom. Where can people find your book, Jason?
Well, you can find it at my website at jasongregory.org, or you can find it anywhere online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or my publisher, Inner Traditions. And it's in bookstores around the world, but if it's not in your local bookshop, order it in. And yeah, just hopefully people get to read it and contact me. I usually try to respond to each email. So,
Good.
I'm accessible that way.
Great. And you're coming to the UK and to the US. What are you going to be doing?
Well, I'm going to be presenting the book, but I'm also going to be presenting a lot of new work as well. And I'll be speaking in the UK and the US. I'll be speaking in London, Brighton, New York City, Troy, Santa Fe, and Los Angeles. So hopefully
Wonderful.
people can come out, and I'll be discussing the book.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jason. And everyone, again, that's jasongregory.org to get more information. Remember, we have Tracy Lockwood joining us next week. Thank you for listening, everyone. We love you very, very much.